Darrell? Okay, we're going on in a minute. Darrell? I don't hear him.
I'm
There.
here.
Oh, great. I hear you. Got it. Okay, so we're going live now. We're ready.
Ready when you are.
Okay. Welcome to HamiltonRadio.net. I am your host, Dr. Nace, and with me tonight is a very special guest, Mr. Darrell Rudd. Darrell Rudd is the president of the World Education Forum in the USA. He has been involved in the field of education for more than 40 years, and he is a strong advocate for public education. The majority of his professional career was spent as an elementary principal, including being named a National Distinguished Principal and being elected as president of the National Association of Elementary School Principals. Many of you know NAESP. Well, Darrell Rudd is a former president of the NAESP. He is semi-retired. He did this in 2012, but he continues to do part-time consulting and advocacy. Welcome, Darrell.
Thank you very much, Felicia.
Thank you so much for being here. I know your schedule is extremely busy, but I'm so happy that you had time to do this interview tonight. So can you tell the listening audience a little bit about the World Education Forum? That term may be new to some of my listeners. What is the World Education Forum?
Well, the World Education Forum has its origin in Europe in the mid-2000s. I first became aware of it in about 2008 when a friend of mine, actually the real pusher behind the development of the World Education Forum, approached me about whether I could help get a foothold in the United States in terms of advocating for education for all children of our world.
Mm-hmm.
I followed up with a visit to a conference in Cyprus where it was one of the key focuses. This was a conference of the European School Heads Association with school leaders from all over Europe. By that time, I was hooked. I felt that it would be a shame if the United States and its wonderful education system
Mm-hmm.
was not represented in this worldwide mission. So it started kind of innocently, and I came back to the States with enthusiasm and started looking around for friends that I could recruit to help me with this initiative.
And what exactly is your mission or your mission statement, if you will?
Well, I don't have the formal one in front of me, but I can shorten it up by saying every child in our world deserves an education, and we strive within the boundaries, primarily within the boundaries of the United States, to seek out opportunities for every child in America between the ages of 3 and 17
Mm-hmm.
to be enrolled in a school to get a quality education so that their future will be brighter. Basically, there's millions of kids in the world, including nearly 6 million children in the United States, that really are not enrolled in any kind of schooling. And without some type of education, certainly their future is not very bright.
That is so true. And it's such a wonderful organization. I have to ask about the man who actually started it. What was his background like? Was he a teacher at one time? Was he a school principal?
Sure. My friend that I alluded to earlier in the questioning, his name is Tom Dijf, and he lives in the Netherlands. He is a former educator, and after teaching for a number of years, he became president of the Dutch School Administrators Association, primarily made up of elementary, middle school, and some high school principals.
Mm-hmm.
It's a large organization, and that's where I met him. When I served as president of the United States Elementary School Principals, as you alluded to earlier,
Mm-hmm.
I was invited to the Netherlands to speak at their conference, and that's where I met Ton. And then some of our subsequent conversations, I heard about his passion for this issue in the world, that way too many millions of children cannot get schooling even if they wanted to for a variety of reasons. He ultimately also became president of that European School Heads Association, a large organization that includes, I believe, more than 80,000 European school administrators.
Wow. So
He's now semi-retired, but he still maintains a global website for the global initiative and keeps this worldwide conversation alive.
mm-hmm. And a worldwide conversation it is. Now that amazes me that in this country, it's one of the wealthiest countries in the world. And so, how do we have children who do not have access to school? How is that possible?
Well, there's a variety of reasons, and I'm not sure that I know them all, but
Mm-hmm.
some are due to poverty, some are due to transiency, some are refugees. In some cases, sadly, kids have dropped out of school. In some cases, the parents of children do not value education. They keep them home to either work or take care of young children.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot of reasons, and I don't know which one would be the one that is more than any. I suspect poverty, perhaps, where they just have no other way of having a stable home and a stable place to go to school. And I'm not making excuses for anybody because I don't always know the reasons. Sometimes they're
Right.
very private. But these are some of the leading things that certainly contribute to this large number of children not in school. We've kind of started focusing a little more on the age 5 to 17-year-olds. There are a few states, I believe 4 or 5, that still do not have state-sponsored preschool. And we'd love to see preschoolers in school also. But not every state agrees with that. And a lot of them do. And certainly the research is very clear that quality preschool education is very, very significant in the lives of children and can certainly lead to more success in school.
Yeah, yes, it is. And like you said, there is a ton of research out there with regard to that. And I think in a lot of areas, they just don't see it as a good investment. I don't know why. I'm like you, but it certainly would be a good investment. So therefore, you guys have decided to just concentrate on from the 5-year-olds to the 17-year-olds.
Well, mostly. It's not like we're ignoring the others, but most of the school people that we talk to feel that the 5 to 17-year-olds are the ones that they can get their arms around. If an entire state is fighting against funding for preschool, for example,
Right.
you almost have to pick your battles. And the battle that seems somewhat attainable focuses more on the age 5 to 17-year-old range.
And that's a lot of ground to cover, too. So I'm sure you stay busy with that range. Yeah.
Well, it's a big group with various needs. We always struggle with how do we help our school people around America find these kids? Okay, there's 4 to 6 million that are not in school. Where are they? Where are they living? Where are they residing? Where are they hiding in some cases?
Right.
Secondly, how do we encourage them to get into school? If perhaps the parent does not have a favorable viewpoint on education, they may not be thrilled about getting their child into school, or they may not trust the school system, whether it's public or private. And so then keeping them in school, especially with those that get up around 15, 16 years old, depending on the mandatory school age in states, gets tricky too, because there's lots of dropouts yet in America. And we'd love to keep more of them in school also.
Oh, yes, absolutely. But that has been a push for a long time. What I haven't heard a lot about is, those populations the other populations you mentioned with regard to we have all these kids who are out of school. I don't think a lot of school administrators even have heard those numbers because perhaps many of these kids are so underground somewhere.
They the numbers are kind of shocking. One of the first questions we always get asked is, does this include homeschool? And the numbers I'm citing do not include homeschool. And so that's a whole different issue, and I'm really not here to talk extensively about it. The kids we're talking about, the millions in America, are ones that don't go to any kind of school, public, private, or homeschool. They're just not enrolled in anything according to the surveys done with the data that we've collected.
Hmm. So how do you collaborate with local school systems when you find pockets of kids where they're not going to school, where they're not attending, where they have large numbers who just drop off the face of the earth, really, because no one's really looking for them, it seems.
Well, they're hard to find sometimes, and I probably need to clarify. One of the terms you used for me was semi-retired, and so we realized that three semi-retired school administrators with lots of experience and lots of connections weren't going to be able to find 4 to 6 million kids across America. So one thing we've been doing is trying to recruit somewhat successfully on-the-ground people in each state, and we call them state ambassadors. And so at this point, as of today, we have 15 states that have active ambassadors that are doing just exactly what you're asking me as to how I do it. I sit largely in the state of Montana, and for me to try and figure out where these kids are in the state of New York, for example, that would be tricky. But I have two school administrators in the state of New York that volunteered to help us. In fact, when we first put out the call, there were 15 New York administrators that said, I would consider doing that. So we were pretty excited about that.
That's awesome.
I hope that that's kind of clear that I don't do it, but we try to give people in each state, as many as we can, the tools that they can use and the ideas and the research and whatnot to help them find these kids, get them in school, keep them in school.
Oh, absolutely. Because, like you said, kids who don't have the proper education, they really don't have a chance in life.
Not in the current society. It's pretty bleak. The statistics are very clear on their earning power and the typical fate of kids that don't get some kind of a education, albeit GED or a diploma or something.
Hmm. Even with critical thinking skills, those kids who have less education than others tend to get taken advantage of, whether it be
Very true.
pricing of housing or whatever. Yeah, they just don't have the critical thinking skill sets that other students have. So
That's true.
yeah, can you provide us with exactly where your needs are in terms of what you would like to see people doing in terms of assisting you in the World Education Forum?
Well, I'll start with it'd be nice to have 35 more ambassadors to represent the 50 states, and we're working on that, it seems like daily, trying to get people who already have full plates to consider taking this up as another thing for either their current life or certainly their post-career life. So just getting more people to become ambassadors, more people to maybe read the data, check out the website, do all these things to really get a good handle on the problem, and then talk to policymakers and decision makers in their community, whether it be letters to the editor, people running for public office, just joining up with, hey, let's do something about this. We're not going to blame right now, but how about if we try for solutions?
Right.
What can we do to get 100, 500, 1,000 extra kids back into our schools in our city or our state, whichever jurisdiction we're talking about? And I guess I always think of that old story about throwing the starfish back in the sea. And if you can save some kids, I think it goes something like, well, I saved that one. And I just think we as a profession and we as a nation have a responsibility to these children to give them opportunities and do whatever we can to try and get them enrolled in school of some type.
Absolutely. I could even see this being, and I know maybe not now, but later on, getting high school students involved in something like this. I know many of the high school students here in New Jersey need to have a certain number of volunteer hours. I could see them actively getting engaged in something like this. I also feel like the millennials, and I don't know if you agree with me or not, but just please jump in. The millennials have a different mindset. It's very much akin to me. you know, um,
Yeah, the word entitlement comes up once in a while in discussions like this.
yes,
That's true.
yeah.
And I think you're posing some really good ideas. There are frequently international clubs or some groups like that in high schools. There's foreign exchange students who may not necessarily come from a country that's suffering from the issues we're talking about, but I just think there's lots of global-minded people in every school that could take this on as a cause. Student councils, I think, are a great thing. Key clubs and other groups within schools are frequently looking for good causes, and I think you've touched on some, and perhaps some of the ones I've mentioned might also help the cause.
Absolutely. And I'd like to ask, now, in your work in the U.S., and I know this is still a relatively new organization, have you found that there are certain pockets where you have more kids who are not going to school, not exposed to any type of schooling at all than others?
Well, I sort of alluded to them earlier, the areas where poverty is a greater thing, where uh, violence is at a higher level, where there's higher than expected dropout rates. The presence of refugees can indicate problems such as this, depending on how they're dealt with. I mean, there's places in America that I'm aware of, including some in my home state, that do wonderful things with bringing the children of refugees and their families comfortably into the community and ingraining them in the community. So I think the main one that seems to stand out is where there's extreme poverty, maybe where education is not valued quite as much. If you go into most major cities, there are parts of it that, right or wrong, are perceived to be higher educated and et cetera, maybe stronger family units and so on. Then there are areas where extreme poverty just divides families or causes extreme issues that are hard to deal with. And so when you're really struggling with just living, sometimes it's hard to let your middle school or high school kids go off when they could be home helping, perhaps working in the fields, perhaps working, taking care of the younger children and so on. There's lots of issues, but I think poverty is probably the big one.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. Poverty being so cyclical in so many parts of the U.S., we have a lot of parents who were not comfortable in schools. And so
True.
they don't like to go out to schools. And when their kids are in trouble constantly, I could see some of them. I mean, I don't see justifying it, but I can understand how some of them might take them out of school and just not want to deal with the bureaucracy because intellectually they feel inferior. They feel like they can't.
True.
Yeah.
If they don't know how to help them be a good student, it's a big issue too. And one of our advisory board members grew up in Iraq. She now lives in the United States as a teacher, but she talks about the importance of helping parents learn how to help their children.
That's
If they
so
know how and can assist them, encourage them, assist them, and help them be more successful, there's a better chance they're going to stay in school also.
Yeah, so true. And so, would you agree with me to say that there is, some blame on the side of the school district as well? Because I don't think we've done in public education a great job of really extending the olive branch to parents. I remember I advocate for a child in my life. This person is not my child, but I do advocate in school for this person and young person. And I remember going into a meeting and it was all jargon, and I think the teachers felt that they were being impressive. That's not impressive to parents. Let's start to speak in
No,
parent language. Yeah.
True.
Yeah, to make them feel more
There
comfortable.
are ways of doing it successfully, and I agree with you that at times we get into educational jargonese that does scare off parents. Most people love their children. I guess I'm overly optimistic, but I
No,
think it's
no, you're
true.
right. You're
But if they
absolutely
don't
right.
know how to help them,
Hmm.
and suddenly the kid comes home after struggling in school, and they ask for help and they don't get it because the parent doesn't know how, the situation is not going to get better. It's highly unlikely. There's only so many hours in the school day for a teacher to help their 25 to 30 kids or whatever number are in their classroom. And realistically, some help has to come from home also. And boy, if
Hmm.
the parents just don't have the training or background, motivation, or time,
Right.
it's not going to go well.
Yeah, it's all going to fall down, all fall apart. And so I just think that there's some shared blame. I certainly am not blaming hardworking teachers or school administrators, but it's something to think about how to train your staff to be more parent friendly.
I think in my prior experiences as a principal, I was a principal 26 years, and I'm not saying that for uh, plaudits or anything, but I worked with high socioeconomic, highly engaged parents and ones on the other end of the socioeconomic spectrum.
Mm-hmm.
And I can honestly say that some of the ones on the lower end of the socioeconomic spectrum were more eager to learn how to help their children. The others, in many cases, knew how already,
Mm-hmm.
but the ones that I'm talking about in Title I schools and so on, if you could generate trust with them, there's a good chance they would figure out some way of coming to help you help their child. It was a beautiful thing with when you can make home visits and have parent friendly conferences and so on, perhaps
Mm.
some training sessions for parents on how
Yes.
to do these things. Most of the time that was pretty successful.
Wow, you hit the nail on the head. That's really the model that I would like to see, as I'm sure you would like to see more of that roll out in school districts, especially the poverty stricken ones across the nation.
Well, I'm not going to put a plug in for, I won't even mention the speaker by name, but you may know him. A friend of mine is a speaker and shows that all the things that have been added to public schools in the last, I think he goes about 80 years without, in most cases, one extra minute or one extra day to the school year being added.
Hmm.
And you may know who I'm talking about. I'm not trying to be vague, but
You can
I
put
guess
his
I'm not here to give plugs to people
no,
either, maybe.
you can absolutely put his name
But
out there. There's not a problem here.
okay, his name is Jamie Vollmer, and
Yes.
he's a nationally recognized speaker, and he is an author, and he writes "Schools Cannot Do It Alone." And if you get a chance, or if your listeners, if there are any listeners, get a
Yes.
chance, I would encourage you to pull up Jamie Vollmer's list of all the things that have been added to schools in the last 50, 60, 70 years. And when you hear about a person saying, how much more can we do? You might want to refer to that list again and say, I don't know. We can't add school days. We can't add school time.
Mm.
A lot of it takes money and taxes and et cetera, et cetera. And it's quite a list. And you look at it and say, wow, schools can't do it alone. It would be nice if they didn't have all this. Uh, I don't want to use the word dump because schools kind of readily accept these things, but
Mm-hmm.
yet it would be nice if the responsibilities were shared by others as well.
Yeah, so true. I totally agree with you on that point. And we're going to take a quick break. When we come back, I would like for you to tell us, just give us a couple of examples of where you have intervened, where you have done work with your organization, the World Education Forum, and what that looks like. I'm sure our listening
I'll give you
audience
a
is
couple of
curious.
examples from the United States, but I'll also give you a couple from across the sea. I think they're also showing hope for this project.
That would be awesome. Okay, so we'll be right back in just a minute.
At times, there's just not enough time in the day to clean your home. Is that cleaning taking over your daily life? You don't get a chance to spend time with your family, and you don't know who to trust to clean your house? Well, Your solution is just a phone call away, and it's Clear Touch Superior Cleaning, the cleaning professional. They give every place they clean the same great service, whether it's homes, offices, restaurants, garages, yards. You could call them for power washing, events, for your floor, for your carpet, and be fully insured. Call Clear Touch Superior Cleaning now at 609-933-477. That's 609-933-477. Call them right now. At times, there's just not enough time in the day to clean your home. Is that cleaning taking over your daily life? You don't get a chance to spend time with your family, and you don't know who to trust to clean your house? Well, your solution is just a phone call away, and it's Clear Touch Superior Cleaning, the cleaning professional. They give every place they clean the same great service, whether it's homes, offices, restaurants, garages, yards. You could call them for power washing, events, for your floor, for your carpet, and be fully insured. Call Clear Touch Superior Cleaning now at 609-933-477. That's 609-933-477. Call them right now.
And welcome back. For those of you who are just joining us, I am here with the president of the World Education Forum, Mr. Darrell Rudd. Welcome back, Darrell.
Thank you.
Darrell is the president of the World Education Forum here in the USA. And we were just talking about, what the World Forum does in terms of helping those kids who in many cases have gone underground, who are off the grid, who are not in school. And I'm amazed at the number of kids that you mentioned earlier who are not in school in the United States and who you are trying to find and who you are trying to help. It's amazing.
There are big numbers, and maybe toward the end of the show I can just put a plug in for our website, because on that site you can go state by state, and with a little coordination or help from me, we can actually bore down into the counties of the United States to find out how many kids in the counties are not in school in every state in the Union. And sometimes it's pretty shocking, but I failed to throw out a number that is just, to me, it sums up the need for this whole thing. UNESCO, that hires an entity called Global Education Monitoring, estimates there are 263 million children in the world that do not have access to education on a regular basis, or not at all. 263 million.
263
and they think that might be
million.
pretty conservative.
263 million. I can understand in some countries where kids may not have access to school. Kids live out in the jungle. They live in very remote places. There are no schools built in some areas. But
True.
when we talk about the United States, most people want to come here because, they think it's a land of milk and honey. So how do we get to these numbers here in the United States?
Well, first of all, I think we have to open our minds and avoid blaming anybody, because that usually doesn't do any good, and just start really looking at the numbers and the data and saying, could we do better? Mm-hmm. And in most cases, the answer is an overwhelming yes. We don't do very well. In fact, on our website, we actually have a chart that shows the percentage of children not in school in the top 15 highly developed countries. And that's not really the question you asked me, but the United States, of the top 15 highly developed countries, we're the third worst of having, in other words, the highest number of children not in school. And there's only two worse, and one is Singapore, which is interesting to me because sometimes they get cited for being such exemplary education.
That's
and
right.
The other is South Korea.
Huh.
And we don't do very well in America, and it's denial and whatever, but I'm not a blame spreader. So I like to think that collaboratively, if we make people aware of these things, we can do better.
Yes, indeed. And
I
thank God for your organization, because there is no one looking for these kids. These are kids who are off the grid, who likely are transient constantly or hiding out for whatever reason, with their parents or by themselves, who knows? But they are off the grid. And so here you are, your organization, you, Dorf, in Holland, are working collaboratively and trying to bring attention to this problem. So I applaud you for that.
Before we took the break, you asked me to think of some examples of things. Now, in the United States, we're kind of in our infancy stages, but we are making some progress. And I'd like to tell you about a couple of our ambassadors. I won't mention them by name, but in one state, at a recent convention of the elementary school principals, he recruited about 25 retired elementary principals to provide the information about our mission and encourage them to share their stories with colleagues in their former school districts, to politicians, family, and neighbors. And he just summed it up by saying there was a great deal of interest and real surprise about the data. Another one in another state talked about how valuable this data was when she was going to approach the legislators who were about to convene in their state capital, to give them some real concrete data about, yes, it's fine to say we're doing better than the neighboring states or better than the nation or whatever, but when you have a few thousand kids that are not in any kind of a school in most states, that's still not a good thing and not acceptable.
That's very
I also,
highly unacceptable.
I was going to cite a couple of things that happened overseas. I'll try to be succinct and answer your question.
No,
but
you know what? We have plenty of time. This is your time, Darrell. So take your time, please.
Okay. Well, the Netherlands is very impressive to me, not because it's where the World Education Forum started, but one of the recent developments was when the cities of Rotterdam, Utrecht, The Hague, and Amsterdam signed a covenant to reduce the number of children not attending school to 0 by 2020. Now, let's say they have an estimated 10,000 kids that are not in school in those 4 large cities in Holland, but they signed a covenant that they're going to do whatever it takes to coordinate agencies and responses and whatnot. And they, too, don't blame. They just say it's for a various number of reasons. But they're going to try and get the truant kids back in school and get all stakeholders to work efficiently together. I thought that was exemplary. And another smaller country that is doing amazing things is the country of Bulgaria. A friend of mine heads up the initiative in that country, and they're doing some wonderful things to connect with their country's government and through their administrator association, making a difference in finding the kids. They're getting a list with the names of children who have to start school for the first time. I'm not sure how they exactly find them in Bulgaria. It probably isn't easy either. But the teachers visit these homes, and the school team is responsible to do whatever it takes to try and get those kids back into school. And I just was so impressed when I heard those success stories from 2 nations that are not just going to let the status quo be acceptable.
Yeah, and hopefully we're following in their footsteps. Holland has
I
always.
hope so.
Yeah, Holland has a special place in my heart. It's always been a progressive place, I think, and so, yeah. So I could really see them doing something like that, ensuring that they lead the way in a sense.
And they are leading the way. We have some initiatives that are either in place or under construction in England, also in Wales, and Slovenia, Croatia, Australia, Nepal, and certainly in our nation too. There are others that have expressed an interest, but it comes down to you have to get 1, 2, 3 crazy people to say, I think our country needs to be represented also and try to make a difference. So
right, absolutely.
Here we are.
Yeah. Now, do you guys have any conferences or meetings coming up that you'd like to tell the listening audience about that they could participate in?
Sure. If they'd like to give us millions of dollars and whatnot, we'll do all those things. And I'm just trying to be funny. We're a nonprofit, and we operate on a shoestring budget. So we don't produce conferences. It was always a dream of Tom Dief, the original founder of the World Education Forum Global, to bring people together from all over the world who had these common beliefs. In The Hague, which is sort of symbolic of peace and whatnot in our world, and it's where the World Court is and everything. And realistically, once you start thinking about travel and money and tight school budgets and all those things, we had to kind of back up. So we just kind of poke our heads in wherever we can. On 3 occasions, we've spoken at the National Association of Elementary School Principals conferences, and we will again this summer in July. And it seems to be a place where their leadership and whatnot have accepted what we're doing. And so we're going to go back there, try and recruit some more ambassadors, try and tell our stories a few more times, and hopefully we'll get even more people. If you check in with us a year from now, maybe we can have much closer to 50 states represented.
Absolutely. Well, we are definitely going to check in with you. I would love to have you come back to give us a progress report at some point.
That would be great.
Yeah. And, if there's a listener out there, I really encourage you, if perhaps you want to give a meeting or, hold a meeting or sponsor a conference, with the World Education Forum. I think what they're doing is just phenomenal. We're talking about kids who have been off the grid and, no one really knows where they are, what they're doing, and we really need to find these kids and get them back on track, get them back in school. So if you want to reach out to Ton, do you have any contact information that you'd like to leave with the listening audience?
Well, I will give my email address, which is probably the best one.
Okay.
And I'll try to say it succinctly and so that you can get it to your listeners. D is in Delta, C is in Charlie, 1, R is in Rabbit, U is in Umbrella, D is in Delta, at gmail.com. DC11RUD at gmail.com. That would probably be the best.
Okay.
And unless they really were obnoxious or something, I will answer every email. I am semi-retired, so, semi-retired people have a little more time than working, busy people. And so I would be glad to answer any questions. We're just doing this out of passion because we were lifelong educators, and if lifelong educators in our country aren't willing to reach out a little bit and do a few things, it's not a real great commentary. So we're going to do our part, and hopefully we can make a difference.
Absolutely. And what a great time in life to do it, and I kind of hear you talking to other administrators out there who might be listening who are also semi-retired. If you're looking for a great project to attach yourself to, this would certainly be one. What I really like about you and Darrell and Ton is, from what I understand in our conversation, you guys have a really solid background in education. You didn't come from the business
that's
world.
Because we're old, Felice. We're all seasoned senior citizen type people who gave a lot, but we got a lot from our profession also. And I would be remiss if I didn't mention a couple other people. The other 2 key people in our initiative are Mary Kay Summers, I'm sorry, I think she's listening today. I had a teacher by the other name. Mary Kay Summers, a retired elementary school principal from Fort Collins, Colorado, and Rich Barbicane, a retired elementary principal from Lancaster, Pennsylvania. We've been kind of the 3 that said, okay, we're in it for the long haul, bring it on, we'll do what we can, and smile because we are, in a small way at least, making a difference.
Well, that's awesome. It appears that you are covering a vast area of the U.S. too. If you say that Mary Summers is in Colorado, and then you have another individual in Lancaster, PA. And
well, in the states where we have ambassadors at the present time are about as diverse as you can get for a list. We have Alaska and Arizona, Arkansas, Colorado,
awesome.
Florida, Kentucky, Massachusetts, Minnesota. Montana, New York, Ohio, South Dakota, Vermont, Washington, Wisconsin.
What?
That's
Come on,
pretty diverse in
come on,
itself.
New Jersey. Come on, New Jersey. Most of my listeners are right here in Jersey, so yeah,
Well, some of them
we have to
probably know me, and
represent.
I probably have already bugged them, but certainly it would be nice to have one, and one or more. We can
Yes.
always take multiples in states also. Just all you have to do is just have that one little extra bit of passion for an issue,
Mm-hmm.
like getting all kids into school and giving them a chance at life. And
Absolutely.
the
Yeah.
rest just kind of falls into place.
So if you want to reach out to Darrell, Darrell can be reached at dc11rud at gmail.com. dc11rud
Correct.
at gmail.com. And, you know, one of the things that I'm sure is near and dear to your heart is making sure that kids are all literate. And
Absolutely.
especially when we talk about STEM programs, and that's a whole other thing because literacy is one thing. It's all interconnected, right? But just being able to read and write is one thing. But some of these technical careers really requires that you are in school from preschool and get a very solid education all the way through in order to be competitive in this global environment of STEM.
I agree.
Yeah. So, some of those kids are way, way behind the eight ball. So what a great project that our listening audience can get involved in today.
I would also just like to put one more plug in for early education. Um, there are those that see it as babysitting and the sole responsibility of parents. And I would say, if you can pull it off as parents in your busy lives and give your child a good foundation, that's great. But a lot of people can't.
Mm-hmm.
And so sometimes children come into school at a real deficit without early childhood education, preschool education. And wherever it's possible, the data is very clear that when you get these toddlers some quality training, it reduces their placement in special ed and gets better graduation rates and lots of good things.
Mm-hmm.
When kids are successful in school, they'll want to come to school.
Yeah,
And
that's true.
part of our problem is resolved when they're successful.
Yeah, yeah, and we also go back to that parent issue too. And especially these days, I'm always shaking my head at our recidivism rates in our prison system, where we have a lot of parents. You know, I had the opportunity to talk to some parents. I usually bring this up on the show, who were incarcerated and who were about to be released. And one of the things that they said was, I watch a lot of television with my child, or I play a lot of, Xbox games. And
Sure.
why? I said, why aren't you reading with your children? And do you know what the response was? I don't know how. And
I hear you.
it's embarrassing when I read with my child. So we've got another
Mm-hmm.
population, right, that breeds that population, and it's just like I said before, it's just so cyclical. So have you guys thought about doing any work with, parents who are imprisoned, or is that something down the line maybe?
Well, I think that'll have to be down the line. We're just trying to put good foundations in place in each state right now. I think that would be our main mission,
Mm-hmm.
and
Yep.
provide these ambassadors who are totally on a volunteer basis with some tools, with some data,
Mm.
with some shared strategies and whatnot. Finding the kids, getting them into school, and keeping them in school. Then a lot of our issues would go away. So it's a good idea, but it might have to come in we call it WEF USA 2.0 or something.
Right. Yeah, for sure. And I understand about wanting to build a foundation first for the things that are near and dearest to your heart. Now, in terms of preparing school principals to take these kids in, how do you prepare a child? And you may not have the absolute answer to this, but I'm so sure you've thought about it. How do you prepare a child who has not been around other kids? Because there's a whole social piece that they lose when they're not in school. And how do they come back into the fold, if you will, and acclimate?
Well, there's kind of an old motto, and I'm not even sure it's written down anywhere, but you have to take the children where they are when they come into school, provide them with tools and levels of instruction that are as close as possible to where they're at.
Mm-hmm.
If you want to scare a kid away, certainly there's probably no better way than giving them something that's way over their head.
Mm-hmm.
And so the socialization part that you allude to is also part of that. Finding some creative ways for a highly talented preschool teacher or kindergarten teacher to assist with that. It's possible. In one of my principalships, we dealt with a lot of children who were, by all definitions, homeless, and many of them had been in 6 to 10 schools already in their early elementary school years,
Mm-hmm.
and so they were used to putting up barriers and walls, and we just through brainstorming with teachers and other staff, we just figured out ways of making that child feel welcome. It's not going to happen overnight,
Mm-hmm.
but good teachers, good support staff, good principals will figure out ways of acclimating that child into the school if we give them a chance. Time is sometimes an issue. Once in a while, money is, but mostly time and training.
Mm-hmm.
And so training in how to deal with families more effectively, how to deal with the social things that you allude to.
Mm-hmm.
It's possible, and good educators, they can do that. They'll figure out a way to do it. I'm not trying to evade your question, but
No, not at
I
all.
saw hundreds of good educators respond to that in exemplary manners when given the chance.
Mm-hmm. Awesome. And then for those who don't know how to do that, you have teachers out there, educators who still have their quote unquote favorites, you know, and but are learning. I think we're getting better as time goes on in education about dealing with diverse groups of students.
Well, I was spoiled. More than 40 years in education, I just had the wonderful opportunities to deal with exemplary individuals. And if you're asking someone to do something that they've never had the training for,
Mm-hmm.
or perhaps don't have the background for, I guess it was our responsibility as a principal to help them get that training and develop those skills along the way. Because I just dealt with really a lot of good ones who just did these things almost by intuition.
Mm. Yeah, I do seriously believe that there are more compassionate, really good teachers out there than there are bad teachers. The bad ones get the press, but the good ones, a lot of times they just go, they're unsung heroes.
Well, that's true. They don't get paid a lot. When I first started being a principal, a lot of the teachers, if they had young families, qualified for poverty type benefits, welfare type benefits, and that's kind of a sad state of affairs in America. But I guess maybe that'll be a topic for another discussion another day, perhaps.
Absolutely. Yeah, teachers definitely are not paid enough in many regions of the U.S. And oftentimes it is a thankless job.
Yeah, especially for what they're asked to do. I go back to that list that Jamie Vollmer put out about all the things that schools are expected to do, and you just look at it and say, I don't know how they do it.
Mm, absolutely. So I'm going to turn the conversation just a little bit to talk about, some of the shootings and things that have been happening in school districts and how many of the students who came into the school buildings with guns, a lot of their peers said they were outcasts. They just didn't fit in. So I'm just thinking as we're talking about, these kids coming back into the fold, coming back into the school district, and hopefully being able to acclimate to the point where they don't feel so out of place that we create another situation. You know what I mean?
I think so.
Yeah, a situation where they feel mentally unfit, where they're just miserable and not able to really acclimate or feel comfortable in that situation.
Well, you're throwing out let's see, this would be like a Molotov cocktail to me, perhaps, in terms of a
It is.
question,
It
and I'll
is.
only give you a personal opinion, and I
Okay,
doubt that
sure.
it's based in research or anything, just lots of experience.
Hmm.
I have a relatively close friend who is a retired principal also, who is still carrying a bullet around in him from a shooting a number of years ago.
Mm.
And so I've really thought about these things a lot, and I'm not sure I have answers, but it always bothers me when I hear about the devaluation of school counselors, school nurses, school social workers, um, psychologists. I can go on and on.
Hmm.
The people that aren't just into the reading, writing, arithmetic part of school, the 3 R's, but are very, very important in the overall health and well-being of individuals.
So true.
Whenever the topic comes up of cutting budgets or anything, several of the things that I mentioned are frequently on the chopping block because Joe Public, in many cases that I have personally dealt with, just doesn't value them in a way that he would say that should be there,
Hmm.
that should be funded, that should be vital for the child's education. So as we cut back on those kind of services for the kind of kids that you're talking about, the troubled ones, we're just only, sadly, I say this, we're facing probably an increase in the number of violent acts in schools if we don't reverse that trend about adequately staffing the school
Mm.
and the entire needs of the child. It's only going to get worse
Absolutely.
before it gets better.
Yeah. And that goes back to, what do our school districts deem as important? Where is the money going? Is these school districts have millions of dollars, some of them. And I don't, well, some,
Okay,
some.
I shouldn't moan over the phone probably or on the interview, but
Well, some.
I don't think there's enough skin in the game for most school districts in America.
Hmm.
I visited dozens of school districts across America when I was president of NAESP, and I actually visited schools in several other countries.
Mm.
And I can honestly say that schools, by and large, and I'm just making a personal statement again,
Hmm.
are underfunded in general. 90% in most school districts goes toward personnel and their salary and benefits, and those should be high priorities. There
Hmm.
isn't much left for the other things that probably could help make a difference. Um,
Mm.
we can buy bottled water. We can do crazy things with going out to eat and movies and whatnot. But to invest in education seems to be something that many people just seal up their pockets about. And I say that from being an advocate in our state capital, but also in our nation's capital.
Hmm.
Those things have to be valued by the decision makers. And until they are, it's not going to get better.
Yeah.
I don't think there are many rich school districts. I went in some,
Hmm.
and their facilities are far superior to those in less equitably funded school districts, and that's another issue in itself. Equity for kids across America. It's not there.
Well, now you don't have to answer this question, but as we close out, we have about we have about 6 minutes left, and
Okay.
yeah. So I'm thinking about what you're saying. I'm reflecting on it, and one of the things that comes to mind is the unspoken. What about all of the illegal immigrants? Right, their children are in many of our school districts across the United States, and we end up paying as taxpayers for these children to be educated for free, and their parents are not putting any money into the pot. I mean, that's just the reality. I'm not saying it's right or wrong. I am just saying this is a reality. And so that's a burden on our school districts, and that's a lot of money that could be freed up if we could effectively address that problem. Any comments on that?
um, well, I'll probably get stoned. I'll never get called back to talk on your radio show again, which I guess is the price you get for sharing your opinion. But I live part of the year in an area where there are a lot of immigrants from another country. I sat in an awards ceremony last Monday night, a week ago today, in another city in another state, and heard the story of a young girl who came to America with immigrant parents and now is an exemplary scholar and is going to make a difference in this world. She was honored as a STEM scholarship recipient to go to the college of her choice. And I sat there and I heard about her mother becoming a teacher, and I thought to myself, before I judge and put a blanket judgment over some of the things that you alluded to, I don't think it's easy to do that. There are some bad situations, but I also know that many of the immigrants who come to America provide a vital service that many Americans are not willing to do.
Well,
And I spend part of my year in Arizona, and I see it here. My family, some of my family lives in California. I see it there.
mm-hmm.
I think we have to be careful not to put a blanket judgment over those who come across the border, and make sure we're not casting this blanket over an entire generation. And maybe more importantly, that we not penalize children in this whole process.
Well,
I think it is possible to educate all children. I just do.
Okay.
So
I get that, and I think it's possible for us to educate all children in their respective countries. That's where we differ. That's okay. The name of the show is called The Argument. So
that's all right.
This is the only one we're probably going to have. But in terms of illegal immigrants and immigrants, see, there is a distinct difference. And I don't have a problem, absolutely not, with immigrants, because I think most of the people who came here, definitely most of the people who came here as an immigrant. There's no problem with that. The problem comes in with illegal immigration. And it's not the harm's way that we put children in, it's the harm's way that their parents put them in once they cross that border. They create a whole
psychological... So is there a statute of limitations on the blame? Is it if they came across the border 1 year ago, 2 years ago, 5 years ago? Is there ever a time where we say they've been here long enough? I'm not advocating that even. I'm just wondering how far we go back in casting that blame.
My thinking is illegal is illegal, Either I'm driving legally.
If they ever did.
Either I'm driving legally or I'm not.
Mm-hmm.
So, I don't know.
Well, it's complex.
Yes,
and,
it is.
And you're not wrong. I just think there are other ways of dealing with it.
Mm-hmm.
And
it's
I'm surely glad that my grandparents made it to America legally, as far as I know, a number of years ago, or I wouldn't be here.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
So.
Yeah. So they did it the right way. You didn't have to live in fear.
Well, I don't think so. No.
Yeah. So that's all good. So we agreed to disagree a little bit, but at any rate, we're going to close out. Are there any parting words, or is there anything that you would like our audience to have in terms of a takeaway from today's conversation?
Well, other than the last part of the conversation where we maybe disagreed, which is fine, I hope that people will consider checking out our website, and I'm not sure how you can convey it to them unless I just tell it to you now. It's W as in Walter, E as in education, F as in Frank, U as in United, S as in States, A as in America.net. So it's wefusa.net, and that certainly would be good. And the other one is the global one, which is 3 words together, worldeducationforum.online. And that's the one that Ton in the Netherlands still maintains for some resources for people all over the world.
Okay. So that one is World Education Forum spelled out .net?
The last one is worldeducationforum.online.
.online. Okay. And then and then your website is wefusa.net.
Correct.
Okay. We will post that on our website here at hamiltonradio.net.
That'd be great.
Yeah.
Yeah, that'd be great.
Well, Darrell, please come back and join us again in a few months.
Okay.
We would love to have you.
I haven't burned too many bridges with my last comments about immigration and so on, but
no, not at all.
I just don't want to forget about the kids and let them get lost in our political global struggle that we adults seem to be messing up on a regular basis.
I totally agree with that. I love kids, and I think we both only want the best for them.
Yep.
Yeah. So on that we agree, and on that note, we will say we will say good night. Thank you so much, Darrell Rudd, president of the World Education Forum USA, for being with us tonight. And to my listening audience, have a great evening.
Thanks for the opportunity.
Thank you. Good night.